When love turns into betrayal and trust into a deadly game, one woman discovers that the people closest to her may be the ones pulling the strings. Every truth she uncovers leads to a darker lie, and as danger closes in, she must decide, follow her heart or survive the deception. But beware, the real enemy is still waiting in the shadows. I am Evangeline Frost, a United States Navy officer, and this is the story of how my father nearly ruined the most important day of my life. The chapel doors loomed ahead, heavy oak carved with old patterns, and the light from the stained glass windows streamed across the aisle in streaks of crimson and gold. It should have felt holy, timeless, and sacred. But for me, those doors were an entry into a battlefield of a different kind, a place where my family's judgment waited like a silent ambush. In the very front pew sat my father, Victor Frost. He wore one of his tailored suits, his silver cufflinks gleaming, his posture rigid, as if he owned the room. That same self-satisfied smirk clung to his face, a look I had known since childhood, one that always told me, "You'll never be enough." He wasn't there to celebrate me. He was there to measure me against the daughter he had always wanted, the delicate, docile figure who would wear lace and silk, not a uniform adorned with 4 stars. As I stepped into the light, I saw his jaw tighten. His eyes flicked to my shoulders, to the insignia that told the world who I was. To him, those stars weren't symbols of sacrifice or leadership. They were an insult, an act of defiance against the traditions he clung to like gospel. The faint curl of his lips told me he thought he had already won. He believed this day, the day of my wedding, would be remembered not for my vows, not for my service, but for what he considered a humiliation. Every step I took down that aisle carried the weight of years under his scrutiny. My uniform, pressed to perfection, glowed under the colored light. His eyes, sharp and scornful, dug into me with that quiet poison I had endured all my life. Yet beneath the sting of his disapproval, I felt something steadier, a strength forged from every battlefield where approval had no meaning and only resolve mattered. The organ swelled, filling the air with music that pressed against the silence of the guests. They shifted, uncertain. Some whispered, their gazes bouncing between my uniform and my father's expression. His smirk widened, as if savoring their confusion. He thought this was his final triumph, that his daughter had once again chosen shame over acceptance. What he did not realize was that the world inside that chapel was about to change. The very definition of respect was waiting just beyond the silence. The words that would shatter his certainty were already coming. Admiral on deck. A few hours earlier, I had been sitting alone in the bridal suite. The uniform lay neatly across the chair before me, its white fabric crisp, the 4 stars gleaming faintly in the morning light. I had worn body armor into combat zones, but that uniform felt heavier than any gear I had ever carried. My phone buzzed on the table. When I picked it up, the screen lit with a message from my father. His words were sharp, deliberate, and designed to cut. "Do not embarrass us by wearing that silly costume." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. For 20 years, Victor Frost had dismissed every honor I'd earned. He had called my deployments distractions, my medals trinkets, my leadership nothing more than stubbornness. Yet somehow, seeing it in black and white on the day of my wedding felt worse, like a final blow meant to rob me of joy. Even here, even now, I was not enough. I clenched my jaw, forcing my breath to stay steady. Inside, though, the ache of invisibility gnawed at me, the familiar wound of being ignored by the man who should have been proud. The door opened without warning, and in walked my brother, Adrian Frost. He carried himself with the same easy arrogance he always had, the golden son who could do no wrong. His success in finance was paraded like a crown, while my years of service were reduced to a curiosity. He glanced at the uniform draped over the chair, and a laugh slipped from his throat. It cut sharper than any blade. "Seriously, Evangeline," he said, smirking, "Dad's going to have a stroke. Couldn't you, for once, just be normal?" To Adrian, my uniform was a joke, a costume for a parade. He couldn't see the lives it represented or the sacrifices behind each medal. He saw only another chance to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy, beneath him, always beneath him. His smirk lingered, as though mocking me was entertainment. Adrian had never stood in a desert waiting for orders that determined whether men lived or died. He had never spent nights staring at maps, praying that the decisions he made would bring his people home. Yet he strutted through life as though his corner office and six-figure bonuses gave him superiority. My parents had believed it, too. To them, Adrian was success incarnate, while I was the daughter who chose a world they neither valued nor understood. As he leaned against the doorframe, his smirk burned into me, and I remembered every dinner where his stories drowned out my own, every holiday where his gifts were extravagant and mine were afterthoughts. His laugh wasn't about my uniform, it was about a lifetime of dismissal. I wanted to scream at him, to make him understand that this uniform wasn't a costume. It was sweat, sleepless nights, and choices that bore the weight of lives. But shouting wouldn't change anything. Adrian lived in a world of unearned approval. I lived in one where respect was earned inch by inch. His mockery wasn't new. It was simply the latest reminder that I would never be more than second place in their eyes. When he left, still chuckling, I looked back at the uniform. My father's words still pulsed on my phone. Adrian's voice still echoed in my ears. But beneath the anger, I felt the steadiness I had learned in the field. They could laugh. They could dismiss. But the truth was this: the uniform carried authority they would never understand. And that day, they would finally see it. The memory of one particular Christmas dinner still haunts me. My father presided at the head of the table, as always, his voice dominating, his opinions silencing everyone else. My mother, Helena Frost, floated about, smoothing over tensions with polite smiles, pretending not to notice the imbalance. At the center, basking in approval, was Adrian. He leaned back, wine glass in hand, and spoke about his latest promotion. His voice rang with self-importance, each pause rewarded with nods and admiration. My parents hung on every word. His corporate victories were celebrated, as if they were the pinnacle of achievement. When there was finally a lull, I quietly mentioned that I had been awarded a distinguished medal only weeks earlier. My words were soft, not because I lacked pride, but because I already knew the response. My father barely looked up. He patted my arm, muttered, "Another little pin," and turned back to Adrian with renewed enthusiasm. In that instant, my accomplishment dissolved, erased as though it had never existed. I was invisible again, a shadow at my own family's table. That night, after dinner, I sat in my car in the freezing air, replaying the moment over and over. The medal that symbolized years of sacrifice had been dismissed as a trinket. I called my mother, hoping she would soften the blow. Her voice was gentle, as always, but her words struck harder than she realized. "He's from another time," she said. "He just wants to see you settled." Settled. As if command and sacrifice, as if leading men through danger, were just a phase. As if I were incomplete until I surrendered to the life he envisioned. In that silence, I finally understood. My family would never see me for who I was. Their approval was a door forever locked. The pain of that truth cut deep, but it also crystallized something inside me. I could no longer chase their recognition. I would have to build something stronger of my own. The radios in the operations center hummed with low static. The screen flickered, showing grainy images of hostages trapped inside a building. SEAL teams crouched outside, waiting for my order. Time was running thin. The team commander's voice came through, steady but edged with urgency. "Requesting permission to execute Alpha maneuver, ma'am." Every set of eyes in the room turned to me. Hardened captains, veterans of decades of combat, waited in silence. My pulse pounded, but my voice was calm, unwavering. "Execute Alpha. Send sitrep when clear." The reply came sharp and immediate. "Roger that, Valkyrie." That call sign carried through the room like a seal of authority. It wasn't a nickname. It was trust. It was the respect of men and women who knew that my decisions carried weight. In that world, I wasn't invisible. In that world, I was seen. And as I sat in the bridal suite, My father's words still burning in my mind. Silly costume. I realized something. I had spent years trying to fight on his terms, yearning for his approval. That hope was gone. This wedding would not be his stage. It would be mine. Piece by piece, I began to plan. The ushers would seat my officers and SEALs in the front rows, just as protocol demanded. My honor guard would follow regulations to the letter. And the fleet admiral himself would officiate, dressed in full uniform. My ceremony would not be a display of tradition for Victor Frost. It would be a lesson in authority, respect, and truth. They thought they were attending a wedding. They were about to witness a demonstration. The organ echoed through the chapel as the guests waited. Then came the sharp, deliberate sound of boots against stone. 2 SEALs entered from the side doors, uniforms immaculate, steps synchronized. They marched to the front and took their posts, statues guarding what was to come. The guests shifted uneasily. Their tailored suits and sparkling jewelry felt strangely out of place against the sea of white and gold uniforms filling the pews. Civilians whispered, their voices hushed, as if they had stumbled into a ceremony they couldn't understand. The organ swelled again. The heavy doors opened. Sunlight poured across the aisle, and I stepped into it, wearing the dress whites of a United States admiral. The fabric gleamed, the 4 stars burning like truths no one could deny. For a moment, silence held the chapel. Then I saw my father lean toward Adrian. His smirk deepened, cruel, and he whispered just loud enough. "She looks ridiculous." The words were meant to cut. Instead, they dissolved into the silence as a voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Admiral on deck." The words cracked like thunder. In an instant, 150 officers and SEALs rose to their feet. The sound of hundreds of hands snapping into salute filled the air, a thunderous wave of recognition. Civilians gasped. Senators, captains, and commanders stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on me with reverence. It was not applause. It was respect, unshakable and undeniable. And in that moment, I saw my father's expression change. The smugness melted. First disbelief, then anger, and finally a flicker of fear. For the first time, Victor Frost saw me, not as a daughter to belittle, but as a force he could never bend. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within Evangeline Frost's heart. Days had turned into weeks since her world was shattered by betrayal, secrets, and the constant threat of danger that loomed over her every move. Though she had braved the unraveling mysteries in Part 1, the darkness surrounding her life had only thickened, pulling her deeper into a labyrinth of suspense where love, lies, and survival clashed at every turn. Evangeline awoke in the quiet of her apartment, sunlight filtering through the thin curtains. For a fleeting moment, peace brushed across her chest, but the sharp edge of reality quickly returned. Adrian Blackwood's warning still haunted her thoughts. "Trust no one, not even those you think you know." His voice lingered like an echo in her mind, pulling her back into the chaos she desperately wished to escape. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. With trembling fingers, she reached for it, expecting yet another cryptic message. Instead, a single word appeared on the screen. "Run." Her chest tightened, and her pulse hammered in her ears. Someone knew where she was. Without hesitation, she gathered her essentials, her laptop, a stack of documents she had painstakingly uncovered, and the small revolver Adrian had insisted she keep close. She stuffed them into her bag, her heart racing with dread. Whoever had sent that message was closing in, and she could no longer afford to remain still. The city felt alive with menace as Evangeline slipped into the streets. She pulled her coat tight around her body, blending into the morning crowd. Yet, everywhere she turned, she felt eyes watching her, silent predators lurking in the shadows. Her instincts screamed louder than ever before. Someone was tracking her every move. She made her way to the abandoned warehouse by the river, the very place Adrian had told her to go if things ever spiraled beyond her control. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete, the silence punctuated only by the distant drip of water. Evangeline drew in a shaky breath before pushing the heavy door open. Inside, Adrian stood waiting. His eyes, sharp as glass, softened when they landed on her. "You got the message," he said quietly. "Yes," she whispered, her throat dry. "But who sent it?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's what we need to find out." Hours bled into one another as they sifted through files, piecing together the puzzle that had already cost them so much. Each document revealed more than the last: shady corporate dealings, hidden accounts, falsified reports, and names of people Evangeline once thought she could trust. Every truth uncovered seemed to paint a new target on her back. The tension between her and Adrian grew heavier with each revelation. Somewhere amidst the darkness, something fragile blossomed between them. Their conversations slipped from cold strategy to stolen moments of vulnerability, quiet admissions, lingering touches, and the kind of glances that carried more meaning than words ever could. Yet neither dared speak aloud the emotions burning beneath the surface. Love was dangerous here, and danger was everywhere. One night, exhaustion claimed Evangeline, and she drifted into a restless sleep on the warehouse cot. A crash jolted her awake. Her eyes flew open to find Adrian wrestling with an intruder, shadows colliding in the dim glow of the single overhead bulb. Evangeline's blood ran cold as she recognized the man's face. It was Damien, her childhood friend, the one person she had trusted most outside of Adrian. "Why?" she gasped, her voice breaking as she stumbled to her feet. Damien's eyes, wild and desperate, flicked toward her. "It was never supposed to be you, Eva. You were just collateral." Her stomach twisted. Betrayal cut deeper than any blade, and this one left her breathless. Adrian overpowered Damien, forcing him to his knees. The truth spilled out in fragments. Damien had been feeding information to the very people hunting her. For months, he had shadowed her life under the guise of loyalty, all while setting her up to be destroyed. The days that followed were a blur of fear and determination. Evangeline and Adrian pressed forward with the evidence, knowing that exposing the truth was their only chance at survival. Their path grew bloodier, the dangers more ruthless. Every encounter pushed them closer together, their bond hardening into something unbreakable. But the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This conspiracy reached higher than either of them had imagined. Powerful figures, political players, and corporate giants were intertwined in a web of corruption that could topple empires. The evidence in Evangeline's hands was enough to start a war. On the final night, with the weight of the world pressing down on her, Evangeline stood before Adrian. Her hands trembled as she held the last file. "If we release this, there's no going back," she said. Adrian's gaze locked with hers, unwavering. "Then we burn the bridge behind us." She wanted to believe that once the truth was free, their nightmare would end. But a voice inside whispered otherwise. The enemy was vast, merciless, and always one step ahead. The dawn of their reckoning came swiftly. The files were leaked, the secrets unleashed. Headlines screamed with corruption, betrayal, and scandal. The world trembled as the empire of lies began to collapse. Yet, amid the chaos, a chilling realization settled over Evangeline. For every name that fell, there were others left untouched. Shadows that still lingered, unseen and waiting. The message that had first warned her, "Run," wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. And as Evangeline Frost watched the world around her ignite, she knew the game was far from over. The suspense would not die here. It had only just begun.